Hello everybody, it's Mr. Second Amendment, and today we're going to be completing an AR-15 bolt, or putting one together. So this will be kind of the final product of where we're going to end up with. Most people, probably this is about as far as we go on an AR-15 bolt, and honestly for just standard cleaning, maintenance, lubrication, this is about this. We don't really need to go any further than this. And this is perfectly fine, but of course there are other things going on with our ejector and our gas rings. So in terms of actually putting a bolt together from the ground up, or maybe you're replacing gas rings, or you want to replace your ejector spring if it needs replacement, this video is going to be helpful for that. We're going to be starting with a Rock River, just a stripped standard bolt by itself. We've got the ejector spring, the roll pin that's going to hold the spring and ejector in place. We got our 3 gas rings back here that are going on the bolt tail. We have the extractor, we have the extractor spring, we've got the insert for the spring. In this case, it is going on an AR pistol that's going to have an 11.5-inch barrel. So on shorter barreled 5.56, we're definitely going to want to have this donut here that's going to go around the extractor spring just to help out with extraction. That's not really needed for 16, 18, 20-inch guns. And then we got the extractor pin right there. So let's go ahead and put this thing together. So first we'll start by putting everything in a magnetic bowl. If you have one, definitely helps out in terms of just keeping track of everything. We'll start out doing the easiest step. So we're just gonna have the gas rings, and we're gonna put one leg over and then roll it around. And this is how we're gonna put all 3 gas rings on here. All right, so we got all 3 gas rings on here. Just real quick, there's a myth that you need to stagger these gas rings or else the gun isn't going to work or anything like that. Not true, and I'm going to do a video where I actually am going to demonstrate something that was demonstrated to me in armor school, of actually starting with 3 rings, taking one out, shooting it with 2 rings, and then, believe it or not, shooting it with 1 gas ring, and everything was still good to go. So just going to leave that for now, but there is going to be a future myth busting kind of video on that. Now we're pretty much good with that. We can start setting up the extractor. So we are going to have our extractor spring. It's going to have a fat end right there and then kind of a skinnier end right there. So what we're going to do is take the insert and just put that rubber insert into the fat end. That rubber insert is going to be inside the extractor, just like that. Now, some of these may be a little tough to put in, and that's just if your extractor is machined to the right dimensions, and sometimes just like that, it may snap in place, it may not. In a worst case scenario, it may have to carefully open up the extractor channel. Not recommended. Something that we can do to kind of help ourselves out if it's being kind of tough is use just some pliers and kind of just clamp down on it just enough to get it in place. So just a little gentle push, and now we've got it set up where the base of that insert is touching the extractor down there. And the spring, we got the fat end of the spring that's actually sitting inside the extractor itself. Next thing we can do is we'll go ahead and put on that donut, and it just goes around the spring, just like that. This one's going to need a little bit more compression. The donut should be laying just right against the extractor. So something that we can do is just kind of push and just kind of get it firmly seated. And then we should have no issue at all getting this pin in. Might be a little tough, at least initially, but you should at this point be able to do it by hand or maybe with just a couple light taps. All right, so now just with just the nylon side of a mallet, just went ahead and pushed that in. Initially, it's going to be really tough. After a little bit of use, that spring is going to fully seat, break in. We're going to be good to go. So we've done the gas rings, we got the spring, the insert, and the donut plus the extractor secured in place by the pin. And now all we have to do is just finish up with the ejector. All right, so what I have here is it's not actually in the vise. I've just got the jaws of my small vise to the right distance to where I can kind of set it up and actually get this pin in so we can see the angle of attack on that pretty much straight down for the most part. We're going to need a 1/16 punch or something of a similar size to basically temporarily hold the parts in place while we use it as a slave pin to hammer it out and get the roll pin in place. This is where we have a little bit of a safety risk in terms of the ejector and the ejector spring. If we mess up, it's going to come flying. So just make sure that you're not in the way, you got eye protection on, or at least not as bad of a situation, but we might lose some of these parts as they go flying. I like to take some CLP and just kind of generously lubricate the spring, the ejector, the roll pin. This is going to be the last time that we're going to see these parts, so we might as well give it a good kind of setup. So we'll start by putting in the ejector spring, and then we're going to put in the ejector. In terms of direction, we've got the smaller end on the left there. That's going into the bolt first. And we got to make sure that we get this lined up because the roll pin sits in that channel to secure it. So right about there is kind of where it wants to sit, just protruding out. The mission is to compress the ejector enough to get that punch, that 1/16 punch in there, so we're actually able to capture it. And then carefully, just so I don't have things shooting across the workbench here and just get lost, going to compress on that, get our punch in. Okay, so now we're in a situation where we have temporarily just kind of got it where it needs to be, and now we just got to swap out the punch for the actual roll pin that's going to go in there. Before we do that, just want to quickly test for function, making sure that the ejector is in fact doing the job it's supposed to do. Okay, so there's a couple punches I'm going to need just because we have it trapped. I backed off this 1/16 punch. You can see it there just enough to get the roll pin actually started. So I'm going to be using a roll pin punch eventually, which look like these, except of course the right size. This one you could probably see better on camera though, where it actually has a tip in there where it goes inside the roll pin. This is a 5/64 roll pin punch. You can kind of see it, and that's going to sit just nicely on our roll pin that we're actually going to be finishing up with that one. But getting this thing started, just a larger punch, any size will be fine. And what I like to do, if I need to use pliers first, just kind of like that. Now they do make an actual fixture that helps you install or remove an ejector on an AR15 bolt. Most people probably are not going to be doing enough bolts to really need to buy that kind of fixture. It's definitely out there, and it makes this job a little easier. So I'm going to see if I can get away without hitting the camera. So I decided to do a little repositioning here, just working with the camera. And right now we're just trying to get it started. And the goal is going to be to ease out the 1/16 punch and just have the roll pin take its place, and to do that without the ejector just flying across the room. So in this case, you can kind of just start. I'm going to cover the ejector and okay, so right now I'm just using the hammer on the roll pin just to get it in. Still covering the ejector. I don't feel any resistance right there. Obviously we're not done yet, but at least the roll pin is capturing it. We still just want to be careful with it until we get the job done. So now I'll transition to a bigger punch. Again, doesn't really matter the size. Okay, now we're pretty much almost there. We can see that this is protruding, and we don't want it to protrude on either side when we're done here. So to finish the job, we're going to use that 5/64 roll pin punch. Don't need the roll pin punch, it just makes life easier. Okay, so let's check both sides. So we can still see it on this side, and on this side we've got nothing yet. I can barely see it in there. Okay, just like pretty much any roll pin, you just want to equalize it. So we are looking sunken in at the same rate on each side. So, okay, we're just going to test for function now, make sure that it's doing its job. And it is good to go. And now we have a fully completed AR-15 bolt. So thanks for watching, and comment for questions.